Hey everyone, another excellent article out of the Financial Post. This one coming from contributor Kevin Carmichael. Headline: No one available to work. How labor woes are crimping our economy's prospects. Kevin Carmichael. Our notoriously weak commitment to productivity and innovation has caught up with us. Sounds like a socialist problem, doesn't it? I think so. Let's read on, see what Kevin tends to think about it. I hope no one thinks Canada's only economic problems are NAFTA and pipelines. If those two issues magically disappeared, we'd be obsessing over a different crisis, an embarrassing inability to take maximum advantage of an impressive run of global economic growth. Our notoriously weak commitment to productivity and innovation has caught up with us. The latest evidence comes in a new report from Business Development Canada, which finds that about 40% of the country's smaller companies are struggling to find workers. And let me tell you someone that actually does function in the work environment, like the private sector. I'm not talking about government and public sector or those who are somewhere in that kind of gray area that rely on the government for their paycheck in some form or some capacity. I'm talking about those in the private sector that would be a representation of these small or even some medium businesses. Yeah, I see it all the time. Matter of fact, I've had real world experience with it and seen it firsthand that there's companies out there, especially that have employees that work in the blue collar field, right? That actually do real physical work, or who are in the trades. They're desperate. They're desperate, seeking just about anybody they can find that will at least rise up and just do the job. Even if they recognize that they're probably not going to be as competent as they'd hoped for, at least they'll step up the game to do their job, or at least to do these jobs. But once again, these employers are looking at it, they're like, where are these workers? Where have they all gone? Aren't we bringing millions of people in? Don't we have a lot of domestic Canadians that need jobs? You better believe there are, and you better believe you do. But apparently, once again, think about it. Think about the incentives. You can either, just pander to the political or ruling class and have them call you and take care of you from cradle to grave, or you can become a personally responsible and accountable human being that actually has to work in the private sector and be productive as a pretense to be gainfully employed and to earn a decent wage. Well, if your choice is that, right, a lot of people that we're seeing out there today rather go the easy route, rather use theft, rather use big government, rather use forced income and wealth redistribution as a means to an end, that actually go out there and do some real hard physical labor or even some good intellectual work, right? Some of the stuff in the private sector, those creative people that are innovative and productive in the private sector that use the brains, not just physical, work, right? Those in the tech industry. No, everyone's now looking, hey, government can give us all these freebies and we don't have to work hard for it, so let's just do that instead. Well, that's just to ramp up. That's just speeding up the process to that race to the bottom. And Canada has been on a fast track course down towards that bottom. Where we're going to get there, when we're going to hit that bottom, I don't know. Actually, I hope we never get to that point. I hope we definitely change course soon and before it's too late. As demographers predicted, Canada's labor pool is shrinking because more men and women are retiring than are joining it. Not so long ago, the ratio of retirees to younger workers was 1-2. It now is 1-1, according to Pierre Sirois, chief economist at BDC. So once again, this is the baby boomer bubble, right? Combined with now they're trying to use this mass influx of immigrants, whether it's legal or illegal, they're trying to, instead of allow proper market forces to work, right, to compensate for these variances, these differences, they're trying to superimpose their central planning model where they can bring foreigners from all areas of the world, and they're going to what? Represent Canada going forward, and the Canadian people that are living here, that have been living here their whole lives, what's going to happen with them? What's the prospects for them? And what do you think that will entail when the people that have been living in this country, who've been oppressed and denied wage increases, proper market valuations in terms of what they are worth economically, or this kind of social values that they bring to the table, while that's been denied because you're not part of the connected ruling class, these politicians, these central planners think that they can just bring in, and that's going to, like these immigrants, and that's going to supplant and supplement the difference in the variances in what's been happening in this country. Well, I'm sorry, you're not going to, that Band-Aid is not going to work. Matter of fact, it may very well contribute to the demise and the downfall of the social and economic sphere in this country. Matter of fact, I believe it definitely will be. I don't even think that's a question at this point. Yes, there are some positive aspects to it, but once again, there is no such thing as this blanket where you can just throw a one-size-fits-all approach and it's going to work out. Not going to happen, folks. We already know how to properly incentivize people, but that's been denied for so long that people don't even recognize, a lot of people don't even recognize how that proper incentive structure, how that properly functions, and how that works. They just think that, hey, you just look towards government and they'll take care of you. Your benevolent political master can take care of you from cradle to the grave, and there's no negative consequences or ramifications for doing so. That's kind of the utopian mentality that these people obviously have. What does that mean? It means it's a limit to growth, he said in an interview at the agency's headquarters in Montreal last week. They refuse contracts. They refuse orders. Exporters are not exporting as much as they could because they don't find people to work for them. The phenomenon can create cognitive dissonance. The jobless rate in July was 5.8%, the lowest in contemporary history according to Statistics Canada records that date to the mid-1970s. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet ministers like to boast about having orchestrated the lowest unemployment rate in at least 40 years. But you got to remember, that employment rate that they show out there, that's only a representation of people that are active in the labor force, right? They don't take into account those who aren't in the labor force participation rate, which at this point now in Canada is like, what, 35% of the population that aren't even actively involved in the labor force because like they figured out a way, right, to live off of everyone's productive wealth and income. So these are people that are benefiting tremendously at the expense of the hardworking people in Canada, and the hardworking people in Canada are recognized because they're probably their neighbors, their friends, they're people in their community, or people that they have maybe associated with the past. Canadians recognize that there's a whole lot of other people in their country that are just seemingly wanting to live off of their productive wealth, their productive labor, and their productive incomes. And they're saying, that's not fair. I don't want to function in this environment no more. However, it's easier to achieve a low jobless rate when the labor force is shrinking and the number of workers is increasing. The excitement about record employment distracts from the fact that companies could be doing so much more. BDC reckons that a company that is afflicted by labor shortages faces significant risk of getting stuck in a low growth trap, constantly turning away orders and correcting the mistakes of ill-trained or overworked staff. Once again, this is speaking to me so much because, like I say, I've seen that anecdotally in my own life so many times that it's completely real and undeniable as far as I'm concerned. The BDC report, based on a survey of 1,208 entrepreneurs, supports other research of which government officials are well aware. Patty Hajdu, the federal labor minister, earlier this year called the shortage of skilled trades workers deep and profound. Within a decade, about 250,000 construction workers will retire, more than double the projected number of new entrants, said Mandy Renahan, chief executive of Freshco, a Toronto-based contractor, citing BuildForce Canada data. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses estimates that about 400,000 jobs were unfilled at the beginning of the year. But once again, you can either fix that by taking, a portion of those 35% of Canadians that don't fucking do anything to be productive in any way, shape, or form or capacity in this country. You can find proper incentives to get them to participate in the labor force, because if they're not participating, somebody else is taking care of them, right? Which is once again destroying the productivity or the kind of wealth or prosperity that those individuals or those people can achieve ultimately. But rather than the political or pundit class or a lot of these big corporations, or even some of these small corporations, rather than fighting against big government, big regulation, and this constant implementation of central planning the economic lives of both these business owners and their employees, rather than pushing back against them, they just seem to go along to get along, put their head between their legs, bow down to their political masters, and hope that something will change at some point in time in the future. No. It's incumbent on you people that are these small business owners to be more bold, to stand up for fucking freedoms, for Christ's sakes. Stop being such cowards. Stop being so conformist. Stop being unwilling to do what is right and properly incentivize your employees. And the only way that happens, and I get it, yeah, the government's stealing from you a lot. But it's the government and taxes and regulation and all these stupid bureaucratic things that cost you money and productivity. Fight back against them. Stop punishing your employees or trying to look elsewhere to compensate the difference. You know, so when the government's taking a larger chunk of your productive pie, stop punishing your employees or potential employees by offering them an even smaller slice of that pie. How about you give them a larger slice of pie, because those are the people that are actually going to help your business, and tell the government, screw you. You're not entitled to anything that I produce. You're not my owner. I'm not your subject. I'm not your serf. I'm not your slave. But once again, we're seeing a lot of business owners here in Canada have become very complacent, very conformist, and basically very inept and unwilling to stand on principle and stand up for genuine free market values and principles. If you start to do that, folks, ooh, it might be scary, but let me tell you, ultimately, just like in the past, just like going forward in the future, you'll recognize that all your fears were mostly unfounded. You're going to benefit, and your employees will benefit, your community will benefit, and ultimately your province and your country will benefit if you stand up and be bold going forward. Stop letting these central planners take the largest or a large percentage of your income or your wealth and productivity that you produce. Stop allowing them to keep chipping away at that. Start rewarding the people that are actually out there doing the hard work, putting in the real work that has actually built this country and has maintained this country and will continue to build it going forward. Reward those people. Get back to proper structures. Get back to proper economic fundamentals. Then you'll see our economy, then you'll see prosperity truly take off. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.